companies are not based on financial success, right? Companies aren't balance sheets and P&Ls. Companies are groups of people, and people work for other people and with other people because we sell our product to people, right? And people go ride the damn thing. So you could have the best technology in the world and not know how to deal with people or lead people to build more technology. And the reality then is you're just got cool technology that nobody knows or cares.
From Escape Collective, this is Overnight Success, the podcast about the entrepreneurs, the personalities, and the passionate people who make up the sport of cycling and the stories behind the icons they've built. Zipp is an indisputable icon in the cycling wheel business, and they have a long history of innovation. They were arguably one of the very first brands who thought about wheels differently and pushed the envelope to what wheels are now today. An engineer by the name of Leigh Sargent is the actual founder of Zipp way back in the late 80s. But it's a gentleman by the name of Andy Ording, who was Leigh's first employee, who bought the company outright in its early days and built Zipp in its formative years. Zipp now belongs to SRAM and its family of products and continues its legacy of innovation, but the origins of this pioneering brand started over 30 years earlier. From the few times I've met Andy Ording, what I can say about him is he's the most enthusiastic, infectious guy in the room. He's probably the smartest guy too, but that's not him trying to sound like he's smart. It's more about the nuggets of wisdom that come out unintentionally. Andy grew up in South Africa and has always been an outdoors tragic, and he'll be the first to admit that he just scraped through high school because he was always out hiking, camping, or sailing. After high school in the mid-70s, he was conscripted to the South African military and was selected for officers training where he carried out his educational logistics. After the military academy, Andy found himself in retail, working for Woolworths, where he took a liking to management and eventually gained a good foundation in his experience and learning programs within the company. He then moved to Central California with his parents, and through old school hitting the pavement, looking for jobs in retail management, he eventually landed a job in the dirt bike industry. And remember those wacky bikes called soft ride? Well, with no previous bike experience, Andy eventually found himself working for the company responsible for these. And in many ways, this is where the Zipp seed got planted.
We rode bikes in South Africa because you can't, like Australia, you can't drive till you're 18. So we lived on bikes, but bikes were transportation. I mean, we would ride bikes to the forestry station so that we could hike for the weekend. And then ride home after, or ride, an hour or something to go sailing to a sailing competition and sail all day and then ride home. And I never even, the whole concept of bikes for competition or bikes being the activity, it's just transportation. In fact, at high school, we had one guy that raced bikes, and we all thought he was weird because he shaved his legs. He even had a European name. I even remember to this day, so funny, Andre Malherbe. And he could have been a Belgian, right? So
yeah.
His dad was a bike rider. He had a Peugeot 10-speed that weighed nothing, and with tubulars glued on the rim. And so mechanically, I'd look at this bike and just go, wow, it's amazing. I think you're crazy, but it's amazing. But it was one guy, and I didn't know anything about it, but it was pretty interesting. For years later, I always laughed about the fact that I had this one guy. I could have learned a whole lot if I just spent some time. If I'd known what was coming, I could have learned a tremendous amount just hanging around with Andre or going to these races. But
was it your job to know? With launching Soft Ride, was it your job to know the market, or were you at a different role?
Well, I think with Soft Ride in the very early stages, I think later on they started to figure out, okay, who do we think could benefit from this? But in the very beginning, we were not sure. We were really, there was lots of different schools of thought, right? Okay, so this is going to be people that ride centuries and long rides and they want comfort. Oh no, this is going to be for folks that want aerodynamic bikes. Oh no, there was a little bit of everything. There was no real, in the very early stages, no real clarification as to what we were going to do. Leigh happened to walk by. So the very first show was, I think, 1989. or 89 or 90 maybe. And he just happened to walk past the booth. I was on top of the
Leigh Sargent.
Leigh Sargent, yeah. So
Leigh Sargent,
I'm
right.
in the Allsop booth. We're busy putting together the booth, and I'm literally on top of the ladder screwing something in or something, and I hear Australian accent walk past the booth. So of course I said something like, "Oh, as Australians, they're all anyway, and or something like that." And I got
Very Aussie.
I go, what the hell? Of course, then you realizes right away it's a South African, and that's what started it. So that
This is Interbike.
Interbike, yeah, in Anaheim
Interbike.
in those days. So in
Right, okay.
Anaheim. And so that's how it started. And anyway, we stayed in contact for a number of years. So what started to happen is he said to the Allsop boys, you know what? I think I could build a bike, because we had two bikes there built out of steel with the down tube, the curved down tube. But these were the very first. We had a custom frame builder, Paul Barkley, built these. So to house the beam. But that's not what we were selling. What I had to go and sell was the retrofittable model, which went on a normal bike, and you would take your seat and seat post out, and you would have this bracing system that attached to the down. I mean, it was a plumber's nightmare, right? It just looked horrible. And conceptually, you can get people to try it like that, but they're not going to buy it really like that unless they have an issue or a significant motivation to do so.
Sorry to interrupt. Just a bit of background on Leigh. Why was Leigh at Interbike? Because Leigh was a former F1 engineer, from what I understand, and he was into the car industry.
Yeah,
Why was Leigh there?
Yeah, jolly good. So Leigh went from Australia he was a pattern maker. So in the days before CAD CAM and lofting and solid surfacing, they used pattern makers who were very skilled with their hands. He did an apprenticeship for a year in the UK, where it's like, the UK was much like Australia, South Africa. We're all, the UK really taught us the creative artisan manufacturing capabilities, right? And he's a very skilled fabricator. And so he went to do his apprenticeship a year in the UK, did that, and decided, I'm here, I might just get a job, right? So he managed to get a job at Williams Formula One. And so he was working at Williams. I think he was there for a year or something, and then decided, I think I'm going to go back to Australia, but I have this opportunity to go to work in America at an IndyCar team. And he came to America, he came to Indy, which is how we're based in Indy. Joined an IndyCar team. Of course, within 8-9 months, I think it was, they were out of money, which is completely normal. And but he'd met a girl, so he wanted to stay. And so he started. It was timing wise very good for him. He started literally got a 3-bay garage, and started to do composite repairs, because at that point composites were just, while they were de rigueur in Formula One already, they were not in IndyCar. IndyCar at this stage were aluminium tubs with an aluminium monocoque and carbon and Kevlar parts bolted, attached. But as that started to move to more and more structural carbon, there was nobody, certainly in Indianapolis, that understood how to repair a structural carbon part that's been damaged. It's not like steel or wood where you can see the damage and you can figure out how to repair it. With carbon, the damage may be a lot deeper. So you really have to sort of excavate into the structure, into the laminates, and build back out. And and he was one of the I think perhaps one of the few people in Indianapolis that had those sort of skills at that time. Perfect timing, for him. Started to do that. So again, another long story. Sorry. So he was asked.
All right.
So Invacare calls out of the blue. Invacare calls the carbon fiber supply. Invacare is the largest wheelchair manufacturer, certainly in America, but might be worldwide. They're based in Cleveland. They call the carbon fiber guys. They go, hey, we've got this idea. We want these, the super fast marathon chair. We want to build that out of carbon, and we need you to help us. And the carbon guys are going, well, that's wonderful. We'll sell you all the carbon, but we can't manufacture it. But where are you? Well, in Cleveland. Well, I got a guy in Indy. Would you like to talk to him? He's a Formula One guy. Oh yeah. So that starts. So the Invacare and relationship then with Leigh Sargent begins, and Leigh says, and so the guys at Invacare say, hey, you know what? We're headed to the bike show in New York. Have you ever been to a bike show? But no, I've never been to a bike show. So, right, well, why did you meet us there? And so he goes to the bike show, meets the Invacare guys. They start up okay, yes, we're agree to proceed, and he's going to start this project on a custom basis. And but while he's there, he's walking around and he's looking at disc wheels. Well, all the disc wheels that he said, when he's asking these guys, well, why would you be riding one of these? And they go, oh, they're much stiffer and they're very aerodynamic. And having spent time in the wind tunnel at Williams and actually being part of the building of the wind tunnel at Williams, he's like, I don't think they're that aerodynamic, and so that didn't really say anything. Because in the back of his mind, he's got an autoclave at his facility, because you have to have an autoclave for automotive repair, for IndyCar repairs. And he had this autoclave, which of course no bike manufacturer is ever going to have an autoclave. All of the disc wheels at that time were lenticular. They all looked like a normal bicycle wheel. So they all had dish, right? So you have more dish on the non-drive side and less dish. And they built them exactly the same way. And he's looking at this going, why do you do that? Well, the cassettes there, and it weren't cassettes, they were freewheels. So they're freewheel and it offsets it, and you can't be in the middle. It's like, that doesn't make any sense. He came back, went to the local bike shop, happened to find in Indianapolis, the guy that was a track specialist. And of course, and JB's in there going, oh yeah, no problem. So Leigh orders like half a dozen disc wheels, and well, how does the tire fit on? Oh, we glue the tire on. Oh, hell, how the hell do you do that? So what are the, give me the specs. And he literally starts with nothing and no cycling background, which was probably to his advantage, right? There's no preconceived ideas of what it is or should be. And sort of basically prototypes the wheel. And
this is all to do the wheelchair wheels.
No, nothing to do with wheelchair, bicycles. So the chair that Invacare wanted to build was actually the chair itself. They hadn't even talked about wheels, because wheels weren't even in his imagination. It was after that meeting, he walked around the bike show and realized, hey, these disc wheels, I think we could build a better disc wheel using an autoclave and a 19, 20 millimeter profile. And so he went back and prototyped this, two totally separate opportunities, and then decided, we'll prototype these, and literally went to a bike. Well, where's the next bike show? Oh, it's in Anaheim. Okay, great. Well, so you got a local guy that had been working with Curtis, who's still top track racer, and so Curtis and Leigh were over there with a table, and about half a dozen wheels. Standing on the table, and in Leigh's own words, he would say to them, well, this is a disc wheel. If you can have it for this much money, would you buy one? They were like, yeah, we'd probably buy one, because he'd took it and he'd put it on the ground, standing on its axle, and he'd stand on it. So because to show everybody the stiffness of a carbon structure, and the whole thing was only 19 millimeters wide, right? The whole thing is this totally flat disc, which didn't exist, completely foreign. Nobody in the industry had seen this. And he'd just stand on it and rock around on the axle. Then he'd make them stand on it. Would, come on, get on it. And they were just totally dumbfounded. It was a bit of Barnum Bailey. And if you know Leigh, if you meet Leigh, he's a very serious guy. He's not a showman. I mean, this is not normal. But it was just his way of saying, this is so stiff that you want stiffness, right? Yeah. Okay. Well, this is so stiff, you can do this. And people went, oh my, can you do that with any other disc wheel? Oh God, no, I wouldn't touch it. I would never do that, right? So this is how it started. And enough people said yes that he came back and started to figure out how to make disc wheels. And that's how Zipp began. I mean, literally. Wow. And that would have been 89.
89. And when did you guys cross paths that you started talking about you coming in?
That happened sort of that same year, just by virtue of the shows. And so what started to happen was he's a brilliant fabricator, but didn't have any idea how didn't have any idea. That's a bit harsh, but didn't have much of an idea how to build a sales force, how to do this, how to, how do you sell these things? Who do you find, etc.
Different skill set.
Yeah. So the front of the building, right? So we started to talk, and it was a mutual third party that said, and we weren't really talking about working together. It was another person, a husband of one of the female athletes that we both happened to sponsor, that said, You know what? You two really should talk to each other, because you do one thing and you do another thing, and I think you should I should talk. And
Yeah.
so we did eventually say, well, okay, let's do that. And so I eventually moved there in 1992. I moved to beginning of 92, moved to Indianapolis to basically take over the front end of the leading edge of the organization, and Leigh was then going to work on more product development. And in the meantime, he had prototyped the bike, the first 2001 bike. He'd been prototyping that, the carbon version of that, and with using a soft ride beam. That very first year, we had a carbon frame with a soft ride beam.
Yeah.
We were the first.
That's how that intersects.
Yeah.
That makes sense now.
That all came together. So that was 1992. So that bike was out for 1 year only, 1992. I went to work with Leigh, left Allsop, went to work with Leigh. In the meantime, the Allsops made an interesting decision, which you might recall this. They developed their own RTM version of the Zipp bike, with a very similar frame and with the integrated soft ride, which they released at the shows in 93. And so we were I was stunned, right? I was just like, oh my word. You've got one OEM in the world manufacturing bikes for your product that you can't really get people to do, to make bikes for, and you've knocked off the one, the one OEM that you have. And on top of that, they decided they wanted Greg Welch, right? So we had Welchie because Australian connection and all the rest of it. So Welchie had said he'd ride it. Well, of course, Allsops went after. They wanted to make the bike. Then when they got the bike done, they went and hired Greg. So
sorry for my ignorance. Greg is who?
Well, Greg Welch is a top Australian triathlete. So top Australian.
Before my time.
Yeah. So, and he won Ironman. I couldn't tell you the record, but Welch is total character, right? So larger than life, very funny bugger. Raced against Mark. He was the Mark Allen, Dave Scott era. I think he came behind Mark, if I remember right. He was after Mark. But was racing at that top level towards the end of the Scott Allen era.
So a huge endorsement for Zipp.
Yeah, it was. Well, of course, then Allsop decided they hired him away, and so we decided we had after a year of selling that frame with that beam, we had realized that not everybody wanted the degree of travel in the beam. They didn't want that much movement. I don't know how you personally felt about it, but but they also. There was also this lateral motion, which was not anticipated initially in the product design, but it was an eventuality, right? That as your pelvis and your legs are so strong, as your pelvis rotates over the seat, you're going to displace that. Even a normal bike moves sideways just because of the power of your legs and the leverage and your pelvis rotating, I think, over the seat, right? So you rock the bike around. More pronounced with a beam. Bike stays stable, but the beam is moving. So we decided to build our own beam. And so from 93 through to 97, we built our own design, limited travel, totally different idea. It was not viscoelastic. It had two little plungers that were inside of a hollow box structure.
Right.
So so I went there in 92, and we then started to figure out how to sell many more wheels and also how to sell frames. And that's how it really began.
The triathlete market was what you were targeting, or was road something that you guys had an ambition to get into, or what was your market at the time?
So we definitely targeted triathletes because triathletes were so open. Most folks that came to triathlon were coming from running or from swimming or something. They weren't at that time anyway. They weren't people that grew up saying, I want to be a triathlete. Very few. So they came from somewhere else. They were totally open-minded. Almost none of them came from road biking. I mean, I am a decent salesperson, and I would go on the road with the Zipp range of product, the wheels, and I would see 4 or 5 dealers every day for 5 days in a row and sell 1 or 2 wheels here and there, because every bike shop in those days was really owned by an ex-roadie, right, or a guy that was still a roadie. And or the fledgling mountain bike thing, which was now maybe 6-7 years old. So they were either mountain bike guys or road bike guys, but very few triathletes owned bike shops in those days. And so it was extremely difficult to sell anything. But I would go to a race, Friday afternoon. End up at some triathlon somewhere, and everybody there was fascinated. They all wanted to know about the technology. They all wanted to find out what does it do, and aerodynamics and carbon and all of those things were words many of them didn't even know what that was, and why is it important, and why do I need it, and how will it benefit, and all the rest of it. And we were speaking a different language, right? So we weren't just trying to sell wheels. We were trying to sell the concept of performance wheels. And we had to convince the whole industry that, this is really a thing. So I decided, hey, I'm not going to see another dealer because they don't buy anything. They want the consumer to walk in. Let's just go talk to the consumer. So there were many weekends where I'd be at one event and we'd have one or two people at other events. We'd work 2 or 3 events every weekend. Developed a little Post-it card because folks couldn't remember, right? They well, what do I ask for? So we got a little card. I said, why don't you bring us your bike? Let's have a look at your bike. Okay, so you want this, you want a 700C, you need a clincher, you need campy, you need 5-speed, 6-speed, 7-speed, whatever it is, blah, blah, blah. They go, take this to your local bike shop. Oh, he can just buy it? Absolutely. And the call would go like this. Hi, this is Andy from Bob's Bikes, and I have a person here who's got a card. Yes, that's great. What does it say on the card? And the dealer would say, ding, 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 ding. We go, great. Yep, we've got those. Hey, they've got those. Well,
real scrappy, just hustling out there,
totally,
right?
Yeah, totally. Because we had to start. We were nothing, right? We were nothing. And, and the
was it called Zipp at this point?
Yes,
Zipp was the
brand.
Where did the name come from?
Oh, Zipp was I think it was Leigh's wife, or the two of them were talking about it. That predates me. Zipp was they wanted single syllable. They wanted something that sounded fast. They found Zipp. Another great story.
Yeah.
So Leigh says, "Oh, I love Zipp. Zipp is great." They do a trademark search. We realize, oh no, there's somebody in the industry that's using Zipp, and it's a fairing. The recumbents, the sit-down recumbent bikes.
Yeah.
Chappie up in Washington State, I believe it was making these really beautiful shaped Perspex windshields called Zipp Designs, I think it was.
Okay.
And so Leigh called him up and said, "Hey, we love this name, and we'd love to use it for wheels, and we'll add another P to it so that it looks different. And would you give us permission to use it?" And he was lovely. He said, "Oh yeah, just don't make anything I'm making, and that'll be fine." And so that's where the name came from.
So you never went into windshields?
No, thank God. We had more than enough trouble.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that predated me. So what we did then, once I got there, I started to really try and get the trademarks under control. And every time we try to get something in Europe, we realized, oh hell, it's owned in Europe. So Piaggio, the scooter company, so mopeds and scooters and bicycles are all in the same classification worldwide. So while we were using it in bicycle, they had a model called a Zipp Express with 1 P, and they had registered it in all these European countries. And I sat on the phone, I faxed them, I did everything to try and get somebody to respond. All I wanted to say was, hey, we'll use it for wheels. We'll never build a scooter. We'll never compete with you. Would you say it's okay? And of course, they would never, ever respond, nothing. So we added speed weaponry underneath. So it was Zipp speed weaponry, just in case somewhere down the road, after years of working to build the brand, somebody turns around and goes, actually, legally, doesn't matter how hard you tried, you're going to have to give it up, or you can't use it, or you can't.
So this gets you around that.
That's right. That's why I would have negotiated. I would have said, okay, I'll come out of Zipp. Give me 2 years, and I'll minimize Zipp, and I'll use speed weaponry, and we'll transition. But give me, I would have tried to negotiate for that. Thank God it never came down to it. Never had to do it. Never had the conversation. And after a while, the statute of limitation runs out, and they can't. They've had at one point, I think it was like 14 years or something, that they had to do something about it, and then they still had never done anything. And you might have noticed now that once SRAM bought the organization, within a few years, they dropped speed weaponry. off, and now it's back to just Zipp on the wheel, which is ironic because that's how it started, right? So that's
Yeah.
20 or 30 years ago.
So it was just you and Leigh working at this time, early 90s, 92. You were sort of the first, had you bought into the business at this point, or were you an employee, or how did it work?
I went on the condition of buying in, right? And I bought a little bit when I first got there, and then over the next 5 years, I bought a little bit more. So I was so the next big stage. So Zipp has sort of got three lives. The first life is Zipp's Leigh's under Leigh's leadership. I was a 20% owner of the organization when I bought him out. What prompted the buyout was in 1997. Do you remember Spinergy?
Yeah. I had a set of Spinergies as well. Yeah.
So the story goes they had raised many millions of dollars from Dow Venture Capital, and Dow had provided a ton of, millions to put into the manufacturing of the product and also then into the marketing. The lesson, what we really learned the hard way was we had tested their wheel. So this is now 1996. We are growing every year. When we grew from literally a disc wheel, the 3-spoke wheel, we had just developed this is now 92, 93, the first deep section wheel, 58 millimeters, and we started to grow. So from then through to 96, growing every year in as fast as we can make it, we're able to sell it. Bikes
in the triathlon market,
in mostly triathlon. Yeah, I'd say vast majority in triathlon. Then in 97, Spinergy comes along. They've now figured out how to manufacture their product, and in 97 they literally flood the market. They've got marketing absolutely everywhere. Every publication has got ads. They signed up numerous pro teams. I can't remember, but from memory, it was like 5 or 6 pro teams. They went from nothing to 4 or 5 or 6 of these guys. They were everywhere. They were totally prevalent. They had so much supply, the manufacturing capacity that they built in, they could give the product to the dealers on consignment and essentially squeeze us out. And at this point, the wheels as a category was growing, but it wasn't like it is today, an accepted part of high performance cycling. And so it devastated us. The first 6 months of 1997, we were 30% ahead of 1996. We were growing, the same rate or more so. And in July, it suddenly turned off. And it stayed off the rest of the year. And it was mostly due to Spinergy. And we felt obviously we were significantly superior. We'd tested their wheel and we knew there was a handling issue with the wheels just because of the paired spoking design. The wheel had those 4 spokes that were paired, so there was one on each side, which by nature would appear to be a more svelte wheel. But in reality, it's going to have a very abnormal handling characteristic because where the spokes join the rim was going to have much more stiffness, right? Your weakest point, especially in cornering, is going to be between the distance between the 2 spokes, right in the middle. And of course, you had this undulation in the wheel during cornering. They try to address it by putting, and you might remember this, but they put like little blocks on the inside. They had 2 different things to do. They stiffened up the inside of the spoke with a insert that they molded in. And then they had a thing called spoke stiffeners, which was literally a thing like this. And those 2 spokes, it went between those 2 spokes and stopped the spokes from being able to move independently, right? So it joined them together.
I remember that, yes.
So they did all of these things to address this handling deficiency. But with so much product and so much marketing, anybody that was thinking about a wheel was literally buying a Spinergy, and it was literally Steve Head of Head Composites up in Minnesota, and us were, we were the carbon wheel people, and so this really impacted both of us. Talking to Steve many years later, we both really took it in the neck. Nearly drove us out of business. It broke us. And but fortuitously, and it's a terrible reason, but it worked well for us, is there one of the pro team lads, the story goes, one of the guys fell, the wheel broke, he got his leg in it, and it lacerated his calf. And the UCI turned around and went, they're out. And that was that. And so the minute that story came out, it was this unbelievable. It was like trying to drink from a fire hose, with what they had managed to do with the power of marketing. And the first time I really witnessed the power of marketing, all of the technical issues aside, we were saying, but guys, the wheels got problems. You don't do this, Oh yeah, but everybody wants them. So the dealers were buying them, right? So dealers were getting them on consignment, consumers were buying them. And when that happened, I can't remember exactly when that was. I think it was 97, 98. And it absolutely devastated them, right? They couldn't sell or give away a wheel after that without addressing this issue. But we, in the meantime, though, we had lost a tremendous amount of money for us. It was really, really scary times. But through that process, I still felt so strongly that we were on the right track, that the category could survive. And I asked Leigh one day if he would just let me buy the organization, his part of the organization. Would he allow me to do that? And he did. And it took us a while to get, of course, the minute money's involved, it takes a while. But it took a while to get all of that stuff through when we finally got that transaction finished. And so I bought him out towards the end of 98. So this all happened in 97. And then in 98, we were just ticking over trying to get this transaction done. In the meantime, Spinergy's sort of coming off the market. We're making enough product to keep going. But our 98 financial year, our 98 financial year was like less than a third of our 96 financial year. We'd been devastated.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And was Leigh working in parallel with repairing carbon fiber from automotive? Yeah. Okay, so he still had a business that you guys were in the same building.
Same building, yeah. We shared the building, and everything was copacetic for a while, and until we decided to move out and buy the organization, and then it got a little bit testy. But at the end of the day, it was great for because he's a brilliant fabricator, and there's no question about it. His real skill, in my mind, is solving a technical problem once, and then he wants to move to the next challenge. I want the next technical issue, and the next and they can keep going up in complexity, and he is totally willing to address all of these things. And so he took his Applied Composites, his company, into all these other fields like aeronautical repair, and not just automotive. It was aeronautics and automation and some really, really clever stuff. That was not, I look at all of that and go, I don't know how to build that business. I'm not sure how that works. I want to make product, and I want to sell a lot of that product, and I want that scalability to be built in the company. And so I looked at it and said, I don't think we've maximized our position in the cycling industry. And so I, risked absolutely everything and took everything. I mean, I sold everything to buy the company. Wow. And we went, my wife and I just went back to basically nothing. Lived in a tiny home with one car, and
is that right?
And we started again with nothing.
How old would you have been at this point?
Well, that was 98. I was born in 59, so I was 39.
Yeah. Okay. So well into your career, this is not an ideal time to be taking such big risks.
No, two little girls, two little ones, and so. Yeah, but I just was so committed to it, and I just felt that this needed to be done properly, and there were so many things that I wanted to do that he decided not to do, or we couldn't afford, or whatever. When I finally did buy the organization, I mean, it was 7 employees, and there was just 7 of us left. We were down to nothing.
Really? Okay. Still in the triathlon market.
Yeah, still predominant. Now, in the meantime, we had built the 303s, which was the 38 millimeter road rim, right? So we knew that we had to grow out of triathlon. You can't live solely in triathlon. So we knew, look, we have to penetrate this road racing market. We couldn't get a European guy to talk to us. Then the Spinergy thing happened. Of course, now nobody's talking to you because of the carbon wheel thing. So a couple of things happened. We worked with you might recall the LA Sheriff's Chevrolet team. They were an American team based in LA. They were sponsored literally by the sheriff's department and the local Chevrolet dealer group, and they were dominant. So from a road racing perspective, they won in Philadelphia. They won all of these one-day challenges all over the place, one-day criteriums. And we worked with those guys. We said, listen, I'm building this rim, but I want you guys need to ride them all the time because I need to learn. We need to see what happens to these things. And of course, they started riding them in road races and they just destroyed them. I mean, the same structure that triathletes would be riding for 2-3 seasons, no trouble. These we get stuff back from going, no, did you hit this with a car? I mean, what are you doing?
Is that right?
Oh gosh, so hard, so much harsher, so much more challenging. Well, you can't see, right? You don't see what you're going to hit. You don't even know that you hit it when you're in race mode. The adrenaline's flowing. You're in the group. You might hit something. It doesn't necessarily flatten the tire. It transfers that load, does some damage. You look at the rim off the race going, oh, geez, this thing's buggered, right? But you finished. Yeah. So in the meantime, we'd been doing that. And so we were predominantly in triathlon, but we were selling what became the 303, the 38 millimeter road racing rim. We had begun to do that to penetrate the other markets with.
Yeah. And but this was a big learning experience for you at the same time.
Oh gosh, yeah. And then of course years later we started working with CSC. When we signed our CSC deal, we said you have to ride carbon wheels all the time because we knew to get the legitimacy and for people to understand that these things are legitimate technology-wise, we knew the boys had to ride them all the time. And in those days, they absolutely didn't do that. Not even triathletes. So triathletes had training wheels and race wheels. And they had aluminum training wheels, and the roadies, they wouldn't touch. We train on aluminum. We said, okay, you can train the training camps and all the training mileage you can do on aluminum wheels, which we'll provide. But every race has to be on carbon wheels. So, and Josh, of course, so it's so hysterical. So anyway, the first team was not CSC. The first team we supplied was actually Lotto. And so Lotto was,
that's 1999.
99. That's exactly. How do you know that? Yeah. How do you know that?
Well, I've seen the bike. And I saw the year on it in the Zipp museum.
Okay, brilliant.
Yes.
Yeah, so that
Jackie Durand won on those wheels.
He did. It was so fantastic, right? So we're totally naive, but we think we know what we're doing. And I get a call one day, Jeff Pierce, who used to ride for LA Sheriff. He's a top pro. He rode for 7-Eleven, in fact, or maybe it was Motorola. But anyway, for that team, for Oshi's team, years before. He then was finished out his career with LA Sheriff Chevrolet. So I knew him, through that relationship. He calls one day. He says he's with GT Bikes. Calls and says, "Hey, we've got this amazing opportunity. We're taking over the Lotto team from Vitus, the French bike manufacturer. If you remember, they were bonded aluminum frames. They're very clever, super light, but the bonds the bonds didn't last, right? They got corroded and the frames would break. So
okay."
So Jeff calls up and says, listen, we're just going to buy aluminum wheels for these guys to ride. Would you be interested in just giving us would you sponsor us with all the time trial wheels, just disc wheels and a deep section, on the front, which would be a 404. And of course, I'm like, absolutely. We've been trying to get into Europe forever. And this is an opportunity. Just the phone literally just rang with this opportunity. We jumped on it. We get that started. That's where Jackie, who's on the squad, decides, I really like these. I'd like to ride them all the time. So we get a question. We get a question on a fax or whatever it is. Hey, Jackie really likes these. Could you send more rear wheel 404s? Because he'd like to ride them. And there's some stages he'd like to do on them. We went, of course. So we do that. And that gets everybody talking, right? Now everybody's watching and they know, and he used to love to go on those flyers, right? He'd go off for 200K, mad.
Breakaway king.
Mad stuff. But he was doing it on 404s. And, and everybody said, well, most of the folks would be, but we can't see the name. I went, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We need to sell the concept of carbon wheels in the Tour de France. We need everybody on them, because then it becomes, the way, the spec you need to have if you're a proper roadie. So, so lucky.
This podcast is fully funded by our members at Escape Collective. In fact, all of our content on our website and our podcast network is 100% supported by our members who believe that cycling media should be independent from the sport and industry we cover, and that we should exist to serve you rather than live or die by our ability to be a platform for the sole purpose of selling you more stuff. If you enjoy this podcast or any of our other work and believe in our mission of independence, please go to escapecollective.com/join and become a member today. Thank you for your support. So just backing up, maybe, I don't know, a year or a few months, but from what I understand, there was a patent on the toroidal shape that the 404s took on. And you guys, you couldn't basically make the shape that you wanted to before that. How did that come about, and what was the patent dispute that you guys couldn't do that, and how did you guys finally come to the 404?
Well, that's also well done. It's great question. But there's a lot going on there, right? So Steve had with another gentleman had developed a patent on what they call a full toroidal shape. So if you can imagine, from the rim, the tire edge, all the way around is toroidal, meaning the brake surface is also angled. It's not flat. Okay. So we looked at that and said, well, yeah, that might be good aerodynamically, but it's not practical. I mean, who's going to set their rim brakes up to do that? Well, triathletes hardly ever touch the brakes, so that'll probably work there, but roadies are never going to ride that. We have to have parallel braking surface, and more so, we have to have a parallel braking surface that is the same or very, very close to the wheels they're going to train on, because you can't be adjusting brakes every single time you swap your wheels, right? It needs to be an in-out. So we were committed to saying we need parallel. So if we're going to have parallel braking surface, we need to now maximize aerodynamics after that. And so that's how we developed this shape with the Christmas tree light bulb thing, right? With a parallel braking surface, and then the toroid that followed. We got a patent on that because that didn't exist. Steve and his partner or associate had got a patent on the full toroid. One day, I'm trying to put together an OEM deal with Cannondale. They're very interested. If you remember, this is years ago, they had a brand called Coda, which was the Cannondale official office. So this was Cannondale before the motorcycle effort that they made. They were so dominant, right? They were powerful. They had Volvo was sponsored. Remember, the mountain bike team had Missy Giovi and Volvo, and they had lovely sponsors and really wicked product and doing a really brilliant job. And they had developed out this Coda brand. And so I wanted to sell wheels/rims to them with that as an OEM private label. I'm talking with those chaps, and we're having this negotiation. The story goes, Steve found out about the potential of this negotiation. All he did was call the guy that I was working with at Cannondale and say, hey, there's a potential litigation here because that violates the patent, which of course it never did. There were two completely standalone separate patents. But it was enough for Cannondale, being a corporate organization, to say, oh gosh, we don't want to be in the middle of this. These two literally two little minnows are going to now fight it out and catch us in the middle of all of this. So I lost that whole deal. I was so mad about it. I called my attorney. I called the patent attorney and said, this is ridiculous. I mean, I've never done that to anybody, and blah, 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 blah. And he said, listen, pal, you're not Eli Lilly. You don't sell $1 billion worth of Prozac. You're not going to spend $200 million to go after somebody, are you? No. Well, how much will you spend? Well, I won't spend anything. Okay, well, that's my point. Okay, so you just want him to stop just to stop. Yes, that's what I want. Okay, well, that's highly unlikely. But Vic was fantastic. He said, you know what? There's another name on this patent. Why don't you find this chap and call him up and buy him out? I went, okay, well, I'll try that. I called inquiries. I said, I need this gentleman's name. They gave me a phone, one. It was only one. They gave me the phone number. I called it. And I said, is this Mr. So-and-so who owns half the patent with the half of the head toroidal patent? He said, it is. I said, would you be interested in selling it? He said he would. And I flew up the next day and we had a deal done in about a week. So
And how did Steve Head feel about this?
he was very sad, right? He had no idea, but they had obviously, there was obviously history there that I didn't know about. I mean, I didn't know about it. I just took a flyer and it happened to work.
Yeah.
And then years later, we did talk about it. Steve and Ann they were fantastic people. Unfortunately, Steve passed away, but I had so much respect for them. Leigh didn't like him didn't like him at all, but for some reason, but I had no issue with them. We competed, we saw each other at the races every weekend, every weekend we saw each other. So this industry is so tiny. I don't have a very good memory for bad stuff anyway. I don't have a department for that. I just want to move on, So he was very sad, obviously, and a bit shocked that his mate would do that, but it was what it was, and it just eliminated that whole thing. So there was never any issue with us selling our product because we had our own patent on our own design. But it turned into, I think the media got a hold of the story and it all got convoluted, but we had never built a toroidal wheel and we had no intention of building a toroidal wheel at that time. Once we bought the patent, it's like, well, okay, well, let's build it. Let's see how that goes.
Okay. So the 404 had nothing to do with this shape and this patent. The 404 would have happened regardless.
The 404 was already not that shape, and we were already selling. And then we got a process patent. So there were a couple of, when you really look back on what builds an organization, there's a couple of key, there's just a handful of key events. One of the key things that we figured out, the lads figured out, was how to mold a welded aluminum hoop into a carbon structure. That was very difficult. Took us a long time to figure out. We were making those rims initially by post bonding that aluminum. And that doesn't really work long term. It works, but it doesn't work long term. And so welding the aluminum hoop and then molding the carbon into it was a necessary development. And we did get it figured out. And then the post machining. So now we could deliver a carbon aerodynamic rim with an aluminum braking surface with the wear indicators in it, just like all the aluminum rims, post machined to within, half a millimeter of perfection. I mean, it was just perfect to ride. Your brakes were exactly the same, and it worked. And we built the organization with that, and we got a process patent on it because it was hard to do. So we had a patent on that too, on the actual process. And so we could literally go to anybody, and especially the Asians, and say, well, if the body of your rim is wider than the brake track on your rim, you violate the patent. The depth makes no difference. If you have a body that's wider than the brake track, you're in violation. If you machine it post molding, you're in violation. So we had a number of blocks, in the road for folks that they had to get over, some hurdles that were technically difficult. But then you had to outmarket us, right? It wasn't just. I mean, our Vic, our patent attorney, wonderful guy. He said to me in that same conversation where he accused me of not wanting to spend any money accurately. And he said, Andy, these patents don't stop anything, right? Patents don't stop anything. Patents, if you think about a cops and robber movie and the bad guy, they always run down an alleyway and there's always a fence at the end of the alley, right? Every bad guy runs down the alley. Well, as they run, they tip over those trash cans to slow down the cops so that they have time to get over the fence. He said, if you think of your patents as those trash cans, you're just knocking them down and slowing them so that you can clear the next technical hurdle. If you think of your patents like this, that's a healthy way to proceed with patents. You're never going to have a patent in the industry that you're in. You sell such slow volume. The reality is you're never going to have a patent strong enough that you're ready to say, oh, I am going to fight, to protect this.
Yeah.
And he was right. It was great advice.
So we're up to the late 90s. Jackie Duran had just done a 250K solo breakaway on the 404s. They put it on the map, I imagine. Where are we at now? We're coming up to Josh Portner being quite a big influence of the company. How did you come to meet Josh in 2000?
Well, also luck, but he actually interviewed for a job he was at Nashville. He was down in Nashville at university doing his engineering degree. Also a gearhead, loves racing and racing technology and manufacturing. He came for an interview next door at a company called Riley, and Riley was building. They were building these sports, like you would race in Le Mans, like sports cars, composite sports cars. And Bob Riley, the dad, was really brilliant man, and the reason for the great success of the organization. Well, his son was the guy that interviewed Josh. They must have been looking for an engineer. He literally was there. He went for the interview, didn't like it. There was something said or whatever. He wasn't very happy about it, but he got in his car and he drove. He wasn't even, he drove from this block to this block and saw the Zipp logo on the door. And literally pulled into the parking lot, walked in and said, is this? Now, he'd raced in Europe already, right? So he is a cyclist. So he comes from steeped in cycling lore, comes in the front door, and he's like, wait, is this Zipp as in like bicycle wheel Zipp? And Bill Vance was in there, and Bill went, yeah, this is it. Wow. Okay. So they start chatting away, and I'm at the back. I'm working with Todd. We're up to our elbows in oil. We're rebuilding something. I can't remember. One of the presses had an issue and we're working on it. And Bill comes back and goes, Andy, I know you're busy, but there's this young guy who walked in and I really think you should meet him. I'm like, really, Bill? Really? Look, I'm not even standing on the floor. I'm up on top of a press, Okay, I'll come out. So I clean up and I go and I sit down with him, and of course we have a great conversation. But he's a young chap. I mean, he hasn't quite finished yet. I can't remember the time of the year, but he hasn't graduated yet. But he's well on his way. And I said, okay, what else have you done? Oh, we started the SAE chapter, and okay, well, tell me about the SAE chapter. What did you do and what did you build? And so we have this great conversation. I said, I'll tell you what, I like you. If you want a job here, I'll hire you. So you call me.
No position available. You just saw something.
And that advice came to a separate story. But I said to him, I like you, and if you really want a job here when you graduate, you call me, and I'll give you a job. And he said, okay. And then so that was that, right? And I'm thinking, so months go by, and I'm thinking, well, I don't actually know if he's gonna call me or not. I might have to call him, and that's terrible for negotiation. I can't have that. I'm gonna have to wait for him. So,
but he obviously left an impression on you if you're thinking about him.
Exactly. Well, he's so articulate, right? You know him well. I mean, he's articulate. He speaks well. He's interested. He wants to solve issues. He's a lot like, I think we're very similar in, I think, is that we really like big, hairy, difficult projects, right? I think we both, we go about it completely different ways, but we enjoy the challenge, right? It's big and it's gnarly. Anyway, so he called one day and said, oh, well, remember I was the guy that came for the meeting and was just interested, and you said you would offer me a job. What? Absolutely. When can you get up here? And so we picked a date, and he packed up his VW and drove up, and that was that, and he started there.
And what kind of job did you have starting there?
There's in engineering. I forget exactly how many. We didn't have many engineers at that time, but he was super young. So, like most young guys, they are wicked smart from a book perspective, but not absolutely great from a practical perspective, because they just haven't had the opportunity, right? They just haven't been able to build something. Universities don't give them really that. Thank God he did the SAE thing. So he figured out how an engine works, how fuel injection works, how to weld metal. I mean, he was better than most. But it was great. And so one of the first things I said to him was, listen, we need to post machine these rims, that clench arm I was talking about. I want you to figure out how to do that. Okay, great. So he starts working on this, and he's involved. Typical Josh. He's involved everywhere. He's learning constantly. We build this machine, or he builds this machine with Todd and a couple of the guys, and we get the first post finishing machining center that's going to do the braking track. And Oh my goodness. And we're all so excited, and he runs it, and it sort of kind of works, but we have these machining marks in the braking track, and we're struggling with it for, days, weeks, whatever it is. We find we can do one side at a time quite well, but we can't do both sides, and too much chatter, as they call it. And so one day, one of our suppliers is in, who's an old machinist, who's been around, machining forever. And he looks at it and went, "What the hell's that?" "Well, we use that to post machine rims." I went, "Oh, that'll never work." He hasn't even seen the problem, right? No, that's never going to work. Well, why not? Well, there's no mass. Well, so what? Why do we need mass? Well, it's harmonics. You need to absorb the vibration. That's why all these machining centers have massive cast iron bases.
Mm.
Ah, well, none of us knew that, right? We're not machinists. We didn't even understand how they work. And so it's just that. And Josh, I can remember him being so crestfallen because he was so proud of this thing, and this was his first project. And of course, it didn't go well, but we learned a great deal in a very short time period. And
Mm.
engineers by nature are risk averse. I'm not. So I would tell them constantly, "Hey guys, you don't need to get it right, because you're not going to get it right in the CAD. You're not going to get it right. Just get 80%, and then we'll just build it. Because the last 20, we're
Yeah,
going to
yeah.
learn half of the last 20% like this. First product we make. So we're now all of a sudden at 90. So now we just have to work on the last little piece." So it became a joke. I mean,
Right.
I would say to, like, especially Mike, who was he's super cautious. He would say, I would say, "Well, okay, Mike, how far are you? How close are we?" 79.5. And they got really good. They got really good at using my own strategy against me.
Yes, yes.
But it was brilliant. So anyway, so Josh comes into the company. That was the first thing, and of course, then we start to go on from one thing to the next, and all the time one of the things I learned through reading was that you cannot re-engineer and pioneer on. You can't fight a battle on five fronts, right? You have to be concentrated. You have to decide where you're going to win. And so for us, I made
Mm.
this decision that, hey, the 404s is how we drive our organization. We need the fastest tubulars and the best performing, fastest clinches that we can get in this 58 millimeter deep section. And we need to reinvent those, or rethink those every 2 to 3 seasons, because everything else can filter off of that. The 303s, the 808s, the 6, they can all benefit from that
Mm.
over time. But you have to have a leading edge. You have to have something you're driving with constantly. And the 404s was that for us. So strategically, that's how we drove into the market. And so that's how all of these incredible innovations came from the boys just being really focused, right? How to make that co-molded rim, how to post machine it. I think, even it's now been discontinued because all clinches are carbon clinches, but for maybe 10, 12 years, we were the only carbon wheel company that had wear indicators on the aluminum brake track. I mean, nobody did that.
Mm.
Nobody did that.
So business was going well at this point? Sounds like you had, what, about a dozen people around the year 2000 or so, or?
Oh, no, no, we were growing rapidly. I mean, we grew from 98 through, for 10 years, or close to 10 years, 9 years, we grew at 30 to 35% every single year.
Wow, fantastic. And the 404 was the driving force that everything sort of filtered down from.
That's right. We drove off of that, and that's where the dimpling came from. It's where the process came from.
Yeah.
It's where all of these different things. I mean, I think we might have told you that, with the whole, Josh had this idea to turn it into like a golf ball. It's like, oh, we're going to dimple these things. Like, how the heck are you going to do that? And it's hard to mold carbon, And so I said to him, "Yeah, okay, I'll give
Yeah.
you." It's sort of half joking, but not really. So if you can do it for $1,000, let's do it. And he said, "Okay," and he went off and figured it out, and it cost him, and he did it for under the prototype. We actually figured out how to do it for less than $1,000, and I was just, wow, that's awesome.
I think that speaks to, it's been told to me before that, you're an amazing leader, and you really know how to get people to want to do things for you by giving them, this brave curiosity, as you've put it before. Talk about your philosophies about leadership and how you get the best out of people.
Well, thank you, but I always had a lot of fun, right? So for me, business, getting up in the morning to go into my company or to work was never hard. I mean, it was always exciting, even in the very dark days and we had a number of times when it was bad, when we almost lost the organization, and but in there were opportunities. And so I suppose we also used a thing called predictive index, which is a personality, not profiling system, but an indicator of what the strengths of certain people are. So certain, engineers have a certain couple of profiles, and salespeople have this kind of a profile. And I looked at that, and my feeling was always, we are never going to settle. So I would set these really ambitious goals for the organization, not just in sales achievement, which of course is the easy one to measure, and everybody can gravitate towards that. But companies are not based on financial success, right? Companies aren't balance sheets and P&Ls. Companies are groups of people, and people work for other people and with other people because we sell our product to people. Right? And people go ride the damn thing. So it's all about, and we're enthusiasts. It's an enthusiast-based industry. So, there's nothing, you could have the best technology in the world and not know how to deal with people or lead people to build more technology. And the reality then is you're just got cool technology that nobody knows or cares. And I think what we were really lucky with, my wife was very involved in the organization. She's fantastic with people, and she worked on the HR side and things like that. And so, that was our sort of thing. I mean, we love people. We want to be around them. We like having them, but we also want to succeed, right? And anything you get for free, you don't attach any value to. Things you work for, things you had to work hard to get, I think you attach a significant amount of value to. And we were so lucky in that we used this PI system to try and from the get-go, try and find the right folks who are really well suited personality-wise to the functions that they would need to perform in the organization. Be very clear what that needs to do, and then say, listen, I want you to do this to the best of your ability, and if that is good enough, you're going to be here for a long time. And we had incredibly low employee turnover. Obviously there's folks you have to let go, and there are folks that choose to go by themselves. But when you really looked at the numbers, our turnover was so low because people love to be there. Not because we had cool technology. They didn't care about that. I mean, people that worked in our factory were amazing folks with beautiful families, and they wanted to bring their kids over, right? So every month we'd cook until the company got too big. I couldn't cook enough hamburgers for everybody quick enough, but we had everybody over. Every month we'd have a lunch, and the guys would come back, and I'd have them talk to everybody. We'd take 2 hours out of the day and try and talk about what we've done, why we're doing it, what it looks like, how the races have gone, et cetera, et cetera. And people feel that people just want to be part of a team, and it's up to the leader to create that team, right? It's absolutely the leader's responsibility, male or female, doesn't matter. But if people are empowered to try things, talk about product engineering and things like that, the best engineers out there are risk averse. Well, where does innovation comes from risk, right? So you have to eliminate that risk in order for the lads to have a go. Let's do it. Let's try it. And we had the same thing in manufacturing. So just because we're doing it this way, there's no sacred cows. Every idea is a good idea. Let's look at them. We might do it. We might not do it. And I don't know. I think you just develop your operating method, your personal operating method, and it just takes time. I think I was, the day that SRAM came in and bought the organization, I think I was still developing. I think I'm now developing differently, but I've never really stopped. I'm still learning. I mean, I'm amazed. Josh, for example, running Silk, I mean, he's teaching me stuff every time we get together because organizations change, right? 10 years later, it's totally different. Now I'm working in companies and industry, working with companies and industries I knew very little about, but it creates this amazing working opportunity or learning opportunity. that you can immerse yourself, right? And you can start to, I'm totally stimulated by things I don't know.
So we're kind of at 2003 now, and one of the big things that happened then was you guys signed CSC
It's
as a
true.
sponsor.
It's true.
And that was, that it was a high profile team. It was, they were competitive in the Tour de France. There was like Fabian Cancellara in the classics. Tell me about signing CSC and what you had to do, the hurdles you had to jump through to first get there, and then what you had to do to actually satisfy that commitment.
Well, like everything, we went in thinking we knew what was going on, and we didn't have a clue, right? So that's life. But we were insistent. So that was the one where we're absolutely insistent. Listen, guys, you've got to race on these things all of the time. We had our own range of hubs. Josh had worked tremendously hard to get the hub thing figured out because they are a challenge. And so we signed, and the primary reason we were really able to sign that team is Bjarne Riis, who was running the team, was his team. Bjarne is very tech oriented. So he loves technology. He wants to know about it. And so part of our relationship with that team was, hey, we're going to go with Cervelo and us. We'll go to the wind tunnel with you, and you bring people, and we'll teach you as much as we can teach you. We'll do everything we can. Between Cervelo and Zipp, and we took him in the tunnel numerous times. We had Carlos Sastre, who was a terrible time trialist, but a wonderful guy, and got him in there, and he improved. His time trialing got better and better and better. And when the Yuri won the Tour de France, he rode a time trial of his life. I mean, yeah. So it all starts like that. So we go, listen, what's more we get? Traveling and backwards and forwards, and we get this deal done. But we wouldn't have got the deal done if Bjarne was a standard team owner and was doing things the normal way. We would never have been able to put that deal together, because we really were a technology partner, and we worked really hard to say, listen, we'll share everything with you because it's in our best interest for you to succeed. And we understand that some of that information will go outside of the circle, and that's okay. And so that's really how it was approached. And so in there, I can't remember the details, but in there was commitments to go to the wind tunnel, to work with the guys, along with Cervelo. So we were both, and of course they were at that point also, very well respected from a technology perspective. And so I think Bjarne was totally enamored with that. Hey man, we're going to have really, really excellent bikes and really good wheels, but more so, we're going to have two companies that are the leaders in their respective fields, or close to being leaders in their respective fields, really, really animated, right? Really involved in our success, really vested. And so, of course, we get all of that stuff done. We send over, more product. I was just unbelievable how much product went over there. I was just shocked at how much product we sent. So then we get it all sorted. We get all the stuff done. And Josh, and I don't know if Josh has told you the story, we might have shared it, but I said to him, it's pretty quiet over there. Josh says, I think we should go and check. I said, well, listen, you just go. So he goes to, I think it was Paris-Nice, or was one of the early classics, right? It was either Paris-Nice or Dauphiné or something. Week long.
Was it Paris?
No. This was very early, right? So very early. So we did Roubaix later, but
a road. Right.
No, this is very early. We're new in the team. They would have got their wheels in like December, January. So this is, early spring. So he goes over there, he meets up with the team. He's just traveling alone because we're a small team. So, hey, you go, you figure it out, tell me what you need. Right, so great. He goes over there, he finds the hotel, he goes to talk to the mechanics, and the mechanics say, oh, well, all those wheels up there in the front of the truck, they're rubbish. We can't use any of those. And, Josh says, well, there's a pile of wheels up there. He goes and takes the hub apart, and he said, it looks like somebody's literally put coffee grounds inside the hub. He takes it apart, and the stuff just falls out. The bearings are disintegrated.
Really?
The racers, because they're steel, have started to rust. And it just comes out in this terrible, goopy mess. And he's just absolutely horrified. It's like, how do you even do this, right? So we thought we knew about road racing because of the LA Sheriff's experience, but they don't ride in the conditions that these guys ride in. They ride every day, and they ride hard, And then at least in those days, mechanics would just take diesel or some sort of degreaser and spray the hell out of it, then take a water power washer and blast it and just push all of that water and all that degreaser into the bearings and through the seals, and such a nightmare. Anyhow, he comes back and goes, and a gentleman at Trek had said to us, great advice. He said, "Listen, you get into the Pro Tour." He said that any failure in the Tour de France, any failure of any kind on the Tour de France, is the manufacturer's fault. He said it doesn't matter. So just remember that anything that goes wrong in the pro peloton, it's your fault. It's always going to be your fault. And we learned. We went, oh my goodness, that's pretty scary, but wonderful advice. So we take Nick, our wheel builder's been with me, another one that's been there for many, many, many years, and I send Nick over to CSC. So so after those spring classics, they will get all the trucks back to the service course and go through absolutely everything. So when they go to the tour, they have, it's about as perfect as it can be. You're basically starting again with brand new everything. So Nick goes over there and, of course, starts to tear apart these things, and they are terrible and in terrible condition and badly maintained. And so it starts a series of education. So we thought we were going to share information on aerodynamics, carbon structures, all of that, which, of course, we did in time. But the first year, I think we were absolutely floored at how hard they were on equipment and how much work had to be done and how much we had to pour into that, So between Nick over there, I had Nick over there. Nick went over there and he called me and you just won't believe it. So we'd made a huge list of spares, shipped all of that over. He went over and got there and went, I will run out. I won't have enough bearings. I won't have enough this. I won't have enough. So we made another date for him to go. But so we got ready for that first tour. But he was back there later in the year with twice as much product. So by the time we were done with that first year, I think our product allocation for the team was easily triple what we thought we were going to do.
Wow. Was there strains with the team? Were they unhappy with the product, or were you servicing it such that they?
I think they loved riding the thing, right? So they knew it was quick. They knew they had a great bike, and they knew they had good product, and it was our best interest to make them always stay like that. They definitely found it a little bit frustrating, but we invested then in the mechanics. Heavily invested in the mechanics. Like, how do we help these guys? And Nick is a wonderful, not only has he built millions of wheels, but he's a very calm personality, right? So he will work with these chaps and train them and help them and guide them as much as they need, and built wonderful relationships that they would call, right? They could talk to each other when he wasn't there. And that doesn't really exist. In some teams, that's, not even allowed, but they were, again, down to Bjarne, and they made some errors. The team made some errors, and they did some stuff that was probably not great from their, from a winning perspective, but from an attitude perspective, they were great. They got mildly frustrated with us, and we had to make it right. But I think, to answer your question, the reason it was acceptable is because they also knew they were pioneering. Right, they were pioneering, and we said to them, "Listen, until such time as we can get wheels into Paris-Roubaix, we will keep working until we get there." And so that was a formative year for us. We learned. It cost a fortune, but a wonderful experience, because we just kept learning and kept learning and kept learning and kept learning and eliminated those issues.
So this is early spring when you see these issues, and then Paris-Roubaix comes, and you got a star like Fabian Cancellara. I think did he win that year?
He might have, I don't know, but they wouldn't. But they had carved out Paris-Roubaix, so they said Paris-Roubaix, we're not doing Paris-Roubaix on carbon wheels, and they carved that out in our agreement, and we agreed because we just didn't know really, what that looked like. So the first couple of years, Paris-Roubaix was not in the program for us, and that was fine. We were fine with it because they ride these, old school aluminum rims. You can't even tell what they are, right? It's not like they're going to ride a competitor's wheel, and it's not like they ride Mavics, and everybody goes, "Whoa, they ride Mavic." It's just some aluminum rim with a big wide tire, and it was nondescript. So it was not a threat for us really. And so we were lucky.
Yeah.
So
Did it put strain on the company at all with regards to like resource and focus or a cash strain on the company, or were you guys quite profitable at that time to be able to absorb that?
we were growing and profitable, and I realized that if we were going to do this kind of stuff at this kind of level, we're going to have to sell a hell of a lot more, And so we really were driving the sales, and we were lucky, right? The industry was the category inside our industry was welcoming and supportive, and we were able to build distribution networks and do well with it, and I think we were just timing-wise, that was incredibly fortuitous. I mean, that was incredibly. You could count the carbon wheel manufacturers on two hands. You go to a trade show, there's 6, 8, 9 people there. That was it. And so it put a tremendous amount of load on us, which we didn't anticipate, personnel-wise, timing-wise, and so there was a massive financial component to that. But really, the thing that we didn't anticipate well at all was time, right? How much time do I have to put into this, and how much time does Josh have to put into it, and how much time did Nick have to put into it, and how much of this stuff? And so that part of it we totally underestimated. Having never done it, we did a shockingly bad job of it, but realized it quick and said, hey, we're going to succeed at this. So what do we need to do? Let's make that happen. And lucky we had one team, right? They were our focus, complete focus. They were our people for road racing, and we said we will do everything to make you win, help you win.
Could you see a link between sales and sponsoring that team and
yes.
what you did there?
Yes, because yes,
you could. Yeah,
you can definitely. It's so early, right? So, and I think companies, you do lose that visibility in time, but the first year, first year you're in, things change, right? Because now suddenly people are, the phone's ring. Wait, I think those are Zipp wheels. Do you have Zipp wheels? Yeah, they do. Oh my word! Well, suddenly your legitimacy just changes, right? It just changes automatically. The power of legitimacy just is there, and suddenly they don't know that you've got coffee grounds in your hubs, right? People that see you in cycling news or velo news, they don't know what your hubs look like. So you're very lucky, and you have to be able to divorce all of that and say, okay, this is really working. This is doing. We need the power of legitimacy in our category, and we need to be there. And that's why we insisted that they have to ride these in every race. We need these things in every stage of every race, and we'll stand behind them. But we need to do it. And so our learning, the grade for the education went like that, right up and to the right. We just went, oh my word, because so much information, so many things were happening, and so much information flow that we couldn't absorb it. We were trying our best to absorb it, and we did, I think, a decent job, having never done it before, of learning quickly, adapting, understanding, and then long-term, of course, playing those out, like hubs, for example. So Josh would come back from, those things and just go, right, what do we need to do with these hubs? What do we do here? What do we do there? We had a number of cyclists in the company, and so we could really talk. They could really talk intelligently about what they're seeing and what's going on, because, by this point, we have a group of excellent athletes that are working there, that have a lot of, Todd, for example, Todd was a top level cyclist, Todd Wingett, and a super mechanical guy. So he's a brilliant mechanic, but he's also a really totally brilliant rider, and so we had a couple of
good Cape Epic teammate.
Oh gosh, yeah, that poor guy. I held him up something horrible for 3 races in a row, but he's just such a nice chap. He was such a nice chap.
Awesome.
He would just ride at whatever pace I was riding, wouldn't say a word. He's never said an angry word. He's never tried to rush me, never anything. He's an amazing guy.
So the company's running well. You're sponsoring World Tour teams. You did Fognac after CSC, and you got into doing the handlebars and cranks and stems. What brought that on? What made you start to grow that? And I never actually thought to ask, what made you ditch the frames?
Oh, well, that was great question. So the last year for frames was 97. So, all of the frames, the issue we ran with is a distribution issue, right? So dealers would say, dealers that stock frames or stock bikes, they get territorial protection with that. So they would look at this and then say, okay, well, I'm going to stock your bike, which means you can't go and hire this guy or this guy or this guy. I'm going to be the bike guy. And they just automatically assumed that applied to wheels. And we're like, no, wheels are non-exclusive. We will sell wheels to any dealer, because if a lady goes off and does a triathlon and her favorite dealer is down the road from you, we're not going to make her change her dealer. She can get her wheels from her favorite dealer, the guy she trusts. And so it became a bit of an issue, right? Because we would have to give some territorial protection on frames, but we didn't on wheels. And it just got quite complicated. And even though we sold, I mean, those frames were very difficult to manufacture, 24 to 28 hours of labor in every bike, made in America. They were, the biggest year we had was 96. I think we sold 350 in 1996. Big year, massively hard operationally, very difficult to do that because of the intricacy of that. And we decided, listen, the conflict thing, the territorial thing, we need to concentrate on being a component company and not try and be a branded bike company, because at some point it's going to be a problem. Right? It's at some point this is not going to work out. It's a little bit like, Campagnolo finally building wheels that were Shimano compatible, but they put the Campagnolo name on it. Well, but it didn't work, right? It doesn't work. People can't put those two things together, and that would have happened to us. Well, wait, you've got a Zipp bike with Zipp wheels, that makes sense, but this bike with Zipp wheels, that doesn't make sense, and so we wanted to avoid that. And so that's how we made, hey, it's components only, and this is what we're going to do. And that decision was one of the better ones we made. And so that was 96 was our biggest year. 97, we built 100 frames. I put the price up $1,000. We had a limited edition 100 bikes, and we put a aluminum ownership plate that we glued onto the inside of the seat stay, if you wanted it, and with your number on it, and 005 of 100, and every bike went out. We sold every one of them. I mean, we never struggled to sell a bike, not once in 5 years.
Wow.
Because we weren't making that much, right? I mean, 150 bikes. If you can't sell 150 bikes to triathletes who are absolutely hungry for technology, then you shouldn't be in the game, honestly. So
right. So Zipp seems to have been an aftermarket brand, in around when in the mid 2000s and that. Was there a big OEM component? Was that a focus for you, or was it aftermarket?
Aftermarket always. Yeah. So we wanted to, always. That was by far the vast majority. I wanted distributors that were aftermarket guys. I didn't really like distributors that had bike lines, because that can sometimes, this territorial thing, you can have issues like that. Yeah. So no, we really wanted to focus. We really wanted to focus on that, and so we did. Yeah. Sorry, just to clarify, we did, of course, get OEM business, but the OEMs, the OEMs wanted it, and Nate, who still actually works there, Nate did a wonderful job, and he was eventually handling all the OEM sales. And I would say to Nate, listen, I don't mind if you sell them 10 wheels. All we want is that bike that has that wheels in their ad, or on their trade show booth, or at the expo. And he did a wonderful job. So I said, I'm not trying to sell hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these things to these OEMs, but they are wonderful marketing partners, and we need to develop a strategy. So build relationships and let's help them out. And we did, and it worked very, very well. At that point, the Asian manufacturers they were making some rims, but they didn't have the performance capability. There were a couple of companies doing it, but not at the level that certainly OEMs would trust it, right? So Specialized is not going to go get Revol. At this time, not going to go get Revol. They're much better off just buying 50 pairs of wheels from us, 100 pairs of wheels from us, putting it on that bike, selling that bike for $2,500 higher than retail, and maximizing their margin, and selling them just like this, and that's the kind of business we wanted. So they did a wonderful job. Nate did a brilliant job of really establishing these relationships with lots of different companies, and selling in the beginning very little stuff. And it was Nate that said to us, you know what? I want to go to this little show, this handmade bike show. I want to go there because everybody that's there, they, and I think maybe there was 20 people there in those days, um, they're all built. This
This
is
is
NABS,
Nabs.
right? And so they
Nabs.
build custom bikes. They're building it for folks that have the money. And I'd like to get some budget to go to these things so that we can deal with them. And we might, in the first year or two, we might sell them 2 pairs of wheels, 3 pairs of wheels. And I was very much in favor. It's like, oh yes, absolutely. And that was really Nate's doing, and he did a wonderful job. And pretty soon we were the dominant wheel. And when you go to NABS, I mean, we were the wheel, and we would do custom decals, and we would put your name on the wheel, and we would do whatever we could to make every OEM feel like they had a relationship with us where we were vested in their success. And if they bought 6 pairs of wheels, well, they bought 6 pairs of wheels. We just want you to use it for the marketing. We were never driving, thousands and thousands of units. And so as a result of it, because we felt that we could control the aftermarket far more successfully than we could the OEM business, and we felt that the OEM business was really a marketing angle, and we charged the OEMs had to pay a lot of money for the wheels. So for smaller OEMs, it worked great, right? They would get them, they would put them on, they'd sell that bike. We would work, they could take 1 pair at a time, they could take 2 pairs at a time. We made it quite easy for them, I think.
So the handlebars, stems, seat posts, cranks, that wasn't an OEM play. What was the business case behind that?
Well, I suppose it's growth, right? We were looking for growth, and I'd said to Josh's team, all right, listen, they'd come up with some ideas on what to do and where to go, and I said to them, listen, find something significant we can hang our hat on, right? Back to the 404. We need something we can hang our hat on, and then we can drive it out. Because the argument now is like, listen, we have distribution set up. We've spent 20 years building this distribution system. We have wonderful marketing partners now around the world, and we are in an enviable brand position. And it's difficult to displace us because you not only have to outsell our salespeople, but you also have to. Your product has to outperform in the real world. So it's not it wasn't. You couldn't just come in and take some business away from us, because if you did, it was generally short term. We were building a product that had the power of legitimacy, that we stood behind 100%. We never allowed any discounting. We fired customers who discounted the product. The MAP policy, that came into being while we were running this, and that helped tremendously. So we were very, very disciplined, because I was, was totally serious about your success. And if we can't maintain pricing integrity, then you can't succeed. You can't make full margin. So the handlebars and that family of product, cranks and handlebars, were basically an extension of our product range, so that we could drop it into an existing distribution system, right? So we now have distributors that are motivated, that are turned on, that understand the product and the philosophy of the company, and now we're going to offer them some more to sell. And with all of that, through all of that, Josh designed I think it was Josh, or the boys came up with a brilliant in-bar cable system where you could put the shifters on the front of the aero bars, but the cable ran inside, and they had a collet system on the back to adjust the bars. That was not previously possible because the collet systems exist in CNC machines, but they don't exist in cycling. And so it was an adaptation that we made, the lads figured out how to make that collet, design that collet, and make it. And that allowed us to run the super clean shifting cables right through the aero bar and out the back. I mean, just straight out the back onto the bike and away. And it just looked beautiful, and on the monocoque bikes, they just came out and went straight into the frame. So super elegant. Now we got something we can hang our hat on. Now we can build out a range, right? We got something we can drive. And so that's how that happened. And so that was painful. Some of the drop bars, of course, we were making in Taiwan, because you really couldn't do them in the United States if effectively price-wise. And that was talk about a whole new lesson, right? You think you know how to make stuff, and then you start doing it somewhere else, and you realize, oh my word, why are they doing that, right? It's just incredibly hard when you've never really had so much dependence on a component that is a finished component and coming from somebody else. So suddenly we had to develop the systems to do that, which we'd never done. I mean, other than tires
Yeah,
and
right.
bits and pieces like that, we sold a tremendous amount of tires, but all of those things. And but the reality is that was very simple, right? It's something they already know how to make. We bring it in, we market, distribute it, sell it, etc. But getting something sourced to our specifications and making it pass, and it was a very difficult process. But we got through it. It was just another nice hairy learning opportunity.
Yeah, yes. So 2007, you sold the company to SRAM. How did that come about, and what's the story behind that?
Well, at some point, we were going to. In my mind, I'd always thought that we would probably, if we didn't go to a strategic acquirer, that we would go to probably some financial organization, then grow it to the next level, probably make a few acquisitions or something. Um, had some
Okay.
ideas.
So this was a growth move.
Yes, I
You
mean we
wanted to
were
grow.
looking at this, saying, okay, we've either got to go with, and I'd known, of course, Stan and FK. I knew that when they developed Grip Shift, we were going to the same triathlons, and they were selling grip shifts for
Yeah,
people to
yeah.
put on their bikes, and I was flogging wheels, and it's just we'd see each other all the time. Yeah, I
You knew
knew
them
them.
well.
No, but the decision came. I had to personally make a decision. We're either going to take this thing and put some real horsepower behind, some more horsepower behind it, and jump up to another level and potentially make some acquisitions to augment this. Because, as I said before, the same reason you would do cranks and bars to expand your footprint, you would have to do. You would now try and do the same thing with another thing that you pulled in, because there's only a certain amount of
Mm.
wheels you're going to sell. And we knew by now that the Asians were obviously making wheels and supplying to a lot of different people. So a lot of those OEM opportunities with Specialized, with folks like that, they're going to go away. And of
Mhm.
course, because it must. I mean, it's just a natural progression. And so it started off by saying, okay, let's try and position the organization with my board. Let's try and position this organization to make that step. And so in order for that to really work well and to have the maximum amount of leverage, we had to time it such that the company was continually growing, had an excellent position in the market. And so when you really looked at it and said, okay, where are we at today, '07, for example, versus where would we be at in '09? Um, I looked at and said, well, we'll be bigger, but we'll be selling more of the same stuff. It fundamentally won't have changed. We won't have changed. We might be in a different facility, a bigger facility, but we'll be doing the same thing. And I think it's
Mhm.
crazy to imagine that your company is just going to grow because you want it to, right? That's not a
Yeah,
strategy. So um,
yeah.
so it had to be either we go to the market now and find a partner that can take this and multiply it out, like a strategic person like SRAM or Shimano or something like this, or we find a
Mhm.
very significant money supply investor, and then we work with that angle. So we went after all of it, and we had options at the very end. So we were very fortunate, right? The company, so that was sort of the company had been growing, and we were very profitable, and we were still opening markets and releasing product. And of course, in the negotiations, because I do love a good negotiation, but in the negotiations, they were like, well, yeah, but you'll never, just because you've grown 30-35% a year for 10 years, you're not going to do it again. It's like, okay, well, we'll just come and see me in 2 years. You're just going to pay more, but
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
we were so lucky, Wade, because so many things had gone our way. I'd gone from zero to building, then back to zero. Actually, the second time through was even lower than zero, and then rebuilt it again. And so I was very fortunate that we were able to, that the industry grew. That category in the industry was growing and continued to grow. We
Mhm.
picked the right marketing opportunities in there. We obviously made plenty of errors, but we fortunately did more right than we did wrong. And we're rewarded with an organization that continued to grow and produce a profit. And so you can get a lot of people looking when you have a decent financial.
So after SRAM acquired Zipp, how was it for you? You never really had a boss to report to, and now I imagine you do. What was that like?
Well, those guys were awesome, right? The senior management at SRAM at that point were very good group of guys. Um, and so they were very accommodating. They part of my deal was a 2 year. I had to work for 2 years to help the transition, which I did. And
Yeah.
they did want me to. They wanted me to stay on. They had a very specific thing they wanted me to drive for the organization, and I said to them, listen, I can be very hard headed, and I drive really hard, and sometimes that does alienate people. And you have a jolly nice company here that I might alienate some people here. This might not go great, and so rather than do that and upset a bunch of folks, it's probably time for me to move on. And I can run the company for me. I don't need to run it for you. And so you carry
Mm,
on.
mm. Were you were you getting tired at this point? Was it like, wow, this has been a 15-year slog? Were you still just as ambitious as ever?
No, I was totally going after it still. I loved it. And in fact, a person in the industry who's still in the industry said to me, he talked to me at a meeting at Interbike, that one of the prior to the sale, and he said, "You're never going to get out. You're way too passionate to get out." We were negotiating. I'm like, and I wouldn't give an inch. He's like, "What do you care? I mean, for Pete's sake." I'm like, "No, this is not right. We're not doing it like this. This is incorrect." He just couldn't believe it. But no, I wasn't tired. I was definitely still motivated because we were having success, right? And nothing breeds success like success. And and we were lucky to have the right team. We'd lost almost no key people in the organization for years, and so part of me was like, okay, if we get this financial injection, I have a plan for that. And if SRAM really comes through, they want to do it, well, then that's going to be a slightly different plan. And then my personal business plan would look different. And so, but I was not
Right.
100% committed to it. And at the very end, there were three final bidders, and the other two were financial organizations. So
Mhm.
we were very fortunate. I mean, I am so fortunate to have been in that position.
I'm Wade Wallace, and thanks for listening to another episode of Overnight Success. If you have suggestions on a remarkable entrepreneurial story within the cycling industry, hit me up on our members Discord channel, where I'd love to hear about it. Until next time, stay inspired and stay tuned for our next episode.